Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome back. Welcome back to my channel. I am back chatting with the incredible Amy Armstrong today. Super excited because what we're chatting about is something that I'm so passionate about. And I know Amy is too, but so many people love this topic, but aren't fully aware of all the different things to look at. So super excited. But anyways, let's introduce the incredible Amy. I'm so excited to have you here chatting about blood markers, blood tests, which ones not to, why you shouldn't, and all the things that fall into that. So welcome. I'm really excited to have you here, babe.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me again. I just, I loved our chat last time, and I think people got a lot out of it, and hopefully they'll get something out of today. Knew that they didn't know before, specifically around iron, around copper, and around the blood panels that, as a root cause protocol consultant, that I use to help people in consults to see their picture of stress. So I just really want to preempt the conversation, I guess, by saying that when we're talking about the blood panel today that we use, the closer that you get to ideal, the better, but there will always be a variation amongst individuals. So there's no specific pattern or set of numbers that reveals kind of some nuance of dysfunction that my recommendations are based on. So we don't look at blood values in this vacuum, with apart from individual symptoms. And the reason, I guess, the rationale for the testing is, it's to kind of validate the impact of our lifetime of stress and stresses, and the impact that they've had, and to prove and to show how these dynamics have affected our minerals. So people really respond best when they can see firsthand, the stress-induced damage that their vital minerals levels and ratios have undergone. So the testing is just a really powerful tool to help clients see that their stress-induced mineral loss has affected their enzymes, which has caused, this metabolic dysfunction that is like the real cause of their symptoms.
Yeah.
Because here's what we know that stress causes symptoms, right? Period. Easy. And the bloods are just one tool that we use to show the client exactly that. So the blood work and the hair tissue mineral analysis, if people get it done, they just help facilitate a conversation to understand the context of those values, if that makes sense. I just kind of stress that it's not it's not a cookie cutter approach based on values on a page. There needs to be context. You're not a doctor. This isn't medical advice. If you want medical advice, you contact your preferred medical practitioner. But what this is it's a discussion about the values and the markers in a specific blood test that help us to understand what's happening with iron in our bodies, and how the conventional medical understanding of this and the interpretation of these values is not accurate. And this isn't my opinion. This isn't your opinion. This is based on an understanding and research of lots of experts on iron and on copper and other minerals. A lot of that research dates way back, 50 years or more. And a lot of that research has been collated and analysed and put back out to the public by my mentor and teacher, Morley Robbins. So we're not chasing ideal labs. That's not actually the point.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really great explanation. So really, in short, what Amy's saying is, looking at just blood markers, your blood panel is not the be all and end all. So there's always so many other contributors that really that needs to be looked at. But there is a really great indicative layout of potentially what's going on inside you. So Let's get started then. I mean, we could go anywhere, but like, how about we start with what people would usually go to their doctor and get? So I know for me, when I've been to my doctor when I was pregnant, even beforehand, the doctor go, cool, let's check your iron. And they would look at, your key things, your ferritin, your hemoglobin, and like all those other markers, along with like thyroid and all of that. So would you mind like maybe touching like on why that is not a great indicator of like iron status?
Yeah, sure. So, and I think we touched on this a little bit last time too about ferritin and what ferritin is and what ferritin isn't. Or rather, perhaps I'll start with hemoglobin. So that's a common measurement that most of us, when we go to the doctor, we'll have our hemoglobin taken, and like you say, we'll have our ferritin taken, and based on what our figures are for those things, on whether the doctor might prescribe us iron supplementation. So hemoglobin is the protein responsible for transporting oxygen. I think about 70% of our iron is found in hemoglobin. So, that's pretty important. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, for many, many years, up until about the 70s, hemoglobin was the most typical blood measurement for iron status. Somehow after that, it turned into measuring ferritin. And when I explain to you exactly what ferritin is in a moment, you probably start to scratch your head about why is that used as the foundational marker of whether we are low in iron in our bodies. So hemoglobin, according to Morley, hemoglobin is he would call it a dipstick way of measuring iron, right? So it's like measuring the amount of oil in your car. So yes, there's some value in knowing how much oil is in your car, because if you run out of oil, your car's going to die. It's going to kill your engine. But it doesn't tell us anything about how your car is running. It just tells us whether you've got oil or not. So it's the same with hemoglobin. So there are far more useful markers that indicate your iron homeostasis, and serum iron is one of those. And when Morley talks about serum iron, he'll talk about it being like, for him being American, that's how we measure per gallon of your car, or kilometres per litre for us. So useful to know. And of course our hemoglobin has to be at a certain level for us to be able to donate blood. So it is important for us to know, but it comes as part of a bigger picture. So the same goes with ferritin. Ferritin is the protein that stores iron in our tissue, in our cells. And what most people actually would not know is that there are two forms of ferritin. There is heavy chain and light chain. And I'm guessing probably most doctors wouldn't know that either. So the standard blood test for ferritin doesn't distinguish between those key features. So it's really an invalid marker to begin with. But the other really important thing about it is once it's leaked into our serum where we measured it, so it's supposed to be inside our cell. It's a cellular protein where the iron is stored. Once it's that ferritin molecule has leaked into our blood, it's a sign of pathophysiology, not a sign of vitality. So basically that means is it shouldn't be there anyway. It shouldn't be in our blood. And when it has, it's been secreted into there, and it's typically dropped its massive load of iron into the cell, which is bad news. So you can understand that it doesn't really indicate how much iron is in our body. It indicates potentially that we've got some issues with our iron, but that's about as far as it goes. And the other really interesting thing about ferritin is to load iron into ferritin, and also to get iron out of ferritin requires bioavailable copper. So that's pretty important to know, isn't it? Like, for that iron to even be accessed, for it to go there in the first place and for it to be taken out, only happens if you've got enough bioavailable copper. So already we can start to see that, okay, there might be something to this copper thing, to understanding, okay, well, how much copper, how much bioavailable copper do we have to actually move this iron around? So I guess when we're talking about blood markers that people typically know of to do with iron, they would be the two.
Yep, they are the two. They're the two that I'm so familiar with, and that's really what the doctors look at. They don't even really look at the other ones. There's a few other ones like your transferrin and your total iron binding and that, but they really only look at your hemoglobin and your ferritin. And just how you've explained is they're really not indicative of iron, the iron stores, iron mobility. They're really not, and they actually can be indicative of other things going on in the body, like you said, like a bit of dysregulation of other minerals and inflammation of all sorts and stress. So I quite there, like just those two things that you just spoke into, and what generally a GP or another practitioner may look at, may be missing some key fundamentals to iron, and potentially iron supplements not being necessary.
Yeah, and we're missing. And I guess the other big takeaway is this: low iron in your blood does not mean low iron in your body. It just means low in your blood. And your body is very, very clever. Your body will sequester that iron in the blood and lock it away to keep it away from pathogens, because pathogens feed on iron. And our bodies are very smart and they want to keep us alive. So that's interesting to know as well.
Yeah, they're so innately smart, aren't they? The more, like, I feel like my studies on iron and iron metabolism and all the minerals that go with it is just, I'm still such a baby. And I feel like every time I read some new literature, or I'll come across another person who's writing to all this and I read what they share, I'm learning new things. And it's so complex. There's so much to take on, but just starting at these small little pointers and really educating ourselves can make a big difference. So like I share a lot about my journey and my healing and the massive difference it's made. But I guess, like, is there anything else in terms of like a general blood panel that like you would want to touch on before we like focus on the full Monty panel and the things that you would recommend or you work with in your practice with clients?
Yeah. So I guess in terms of what a doctor might measure, look, clients will bring other blood tests with them from time to time, which we can have a chat about, especially if they're flagging that they've got some issues in different areas of their bodies. But really, no, my training is in minerals, and I like to be able to explain to clients how, lots of women will come with thyroid panels, and we really get into talking about, well, okay, let's bring that back down to the foundation of why are our hormones acting up? What are the minerals that are underneath, or that underplay those hormones for them to be acting up in the first place? So I just try and keep bringing it back to the foundation, which is mineral.
Hence root cause protocol. It's back to the root. And it's such a really powerful small little statement that you just made. And it's like, you can look at all of this, you can go, I've had painful periods, I've got a heavy bleed, the doctor says I need iron supplements, any of that. But really coming back to the root and starting at those foundations is very pivotal and extremely, like, it can change the whole trajectory of your health just by looking at that alone, can't it?
And let's is the key foundational nutrients that they need to be able to perform their tasks, for the enzymes to be able to work, for the hormones to be able to be balanced. Let's give it those and those minerals, and let it go to work itself. So for me and my training, I guess it's always back to the minerals. So there's some other markers amongst hemoglobin and ferritin that we would look at. Did you want me to talk a bit about those?
Let's go into that, Amy. Let's have a look at just say I've come to you, I've been taking iron supplements, I'm highly stressed, the doctor's saying this, and I'm at my wit's end, and I've come to you, and you've gotten to know me, you know that I've got 2 children and I'm not married, but let's say I am, and all of that, and you're up to the stage where you want to work with me and really have a look at what's going on inside of my body. Let's explore that. Like, share with me where you would take me.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the blood work, I guess, like I said at the start, this would all happen in the context of a conversation around the stress of your life.
I'm
And
highly
what you're
stressed. Oh,
talking specifically about, what I would share around the blood markers when we got to that. I guess, yeah, I can, provide some really basic information to help you understand what those markers mean and why we might measure them. And again, of course, just to reiterate that what that means for that particular person comes inside the context of that conversation with that person. So serum iron, which I mentioned before, which Morley would refer to as measuring, miles per gallon, so how efficiently your car is running, because that's what's important at the end of the day, is how efficiently your body is running. And in this case, how efficiently you're recycling iron. So, and that's what serum iron does. It basically measures the efficiency of our iron recycling system in our body. So I'll just back up a little bit and explain what that iron recycling system is. So it's called the reticuloendothelial system, RES.
I never call it its name.
Calling it iron recycling system, which is essentially what it is. So the iron recycling system inside our bodies provides 95% of our daily iron needs. So out of the 25 milligrams of iron that we need in a day, only 1 milligram of that comes from food or supplementation for a lot of people, which is much, much higher. Yeah. So if you think about that in context of putting more and more and more iron in, it's got to go somewhere. Mm. So when our iron recycling system isn't working very well, that's when we start to, this iron starts to be stored in our tissue, and it causes us, really big problems. The important bit about our recycling system is it is absolutely dependent on bioavailable copper to ensure that iron is recycling. Yeah. Okay, so the serum iron that we measure in our bloods gives us an indication. So if it's, very above the ideal or very below the ideal, we know there's a crisis with your iron circulation. And it's just another sign of stress in your body, and specifically, oxidative stress, which is a big deal. And it's inflammation. So when we I keep going to go back up. So we can only go so far. I guess people are going back to our last conversation to get some more information. But basically, inflammation is caused by excess unbound iron, okay, in our body. That's what causes. And it's the result of our copper-based antioxidant enzymes not working properly, all right, because there is too much iron. So they really work hand in hand together. Other markers that we might use, transferrin. So we will always look at your transferrin, and that measures the key, or it is the key transport protein. So that's what recycles your iron from the tissue back into the bloodstream. Okay, so transferrin moves our iron. But of course, for transferrin to access the iron, again, I'll let you guess what mineral we need to access the iron to get it on transferrin.
Let me guess, is it either bioavailable vitamin A or is it bioavailable copper?
Both, actually. Oh, it's both. Without retinol, which is animal-based vitamin A. And animal-based vitamin A, that retinol, is what loads the copper into its protein called ceruloplasmin, which I'll explain in a minute. Most people wouldn't have heard of that protein, but that is where our bioavailable, our copper is housed to be available for our bodies to use. The protein transferrin is really reliant on retinol, and most people have retinol in their diets, and that comes by way of eating animal fats. And, we've been conditioned for such a long time that animal fats are evil and they clog our arteries and they cause us heart disease. So it's quite countercultural for people to be eating the amount of good quality fats that they need to be accessing that retinol and other nutrients as well, to help our iron be functional. So ceruloplasmin and transferrin are two of the most important proteins for monitoring the efficiency of our iron recycling system. So, you know, when they are low, again, we're looking at ideal, and we're looking at anything, the further away you move from that ideal, the more likely, I guess, you are to have symptoms. So, you know, when transferrin and ceruloplasmin have moved away from that ideal, you know, we know that there's a shortage of retinol. We know that there's a shortage of bioavailable copper, and we know that, you know, you're probably going to have inflammation. Yes. So that's probably a good time to explain what bioavailable copper is and what ceruloplasmin is. We're getting down to the weeds of it now, so you know, you might need to go back and watch this video again to get a bit of an understanding of and let it all sink in. But
I'll drop a heap of like links below as well, like to your, like all of your information, to the root cause protocol, and to like maybe even any posts that we've both shared on things like this, like your ceruloplasmin and whatnot, to add to it. But like Amy said before as well, go back and watch part 1, because we do cover a lot that will make so much sense going through what we're going through. So yes, please, let's continue. This is like, it's so juicy.
Okay, so you know, copper is pretty profound in our bodies, and Morley Robbins likes to talk about copper a lot, and it just has, it's such a key nutrient in our health and in our energy production. It's vital for our energy production. It is what activates oxygen to make energy. Okay, iron doesn't do that. Iron carries, you know, iron, he would say, is like the waiter. It carries the oxygen. It's copper who's like the chef in the kitchen, making the fabulous meal that the iron then goes and gives to the customer. It's the one that is activating that iron, and it is helping us to make energy efficiently. So copper has to be bioavailable, which means it's got to be housed, or it's got to be complexed in, you know, a network of proteins and enzymes for it to be usable by our body. And that doesn't kind of happen magically. Retinol is essential.
Yes.
And about 95% of our copper is complexed in ceruloplasmin. Okay, so what is ceruloplasmin? Ceruloplasmin is a copper-based protein, and here's the thing about ceruloplasmin: it has an active state when it has a ferrooxidase function. Okay, that's when it can do the magic of being our master antioxidant enzyme and, you know, safely chaperoning that iron around our bodies. So the problem is there's no test for that. There's no test to tell how much of your ceruloplasmin is active. And so we kind of extrapolate that from looking at your story, from looking at your stresses, from looking at your, you know, your values on the page. And again, Morley's full of great analogies, so I do draw on them because I can't think of any more original, better ones for myself. But he would talk about ceruloplasmin being like a car yard full of cars with the bonnets down. You have no way of knowing which cars in that yard have a motor under their bonnet. So, you know, you can go around and count the cars, but you don't know which ones of those cars are going to be functional. And it's the same with our ceruloplasmin. We can't measure the ferrooxidase function of that ceruloplasmin to know if it's serving us in what it needs to do. So without that optimal ferrooxidase function that it has, that turns into an enzyme, you know, we know that iron's not going to be moving around our bodies. When our iron's not moving around our bodies, it's stored in our tissues. Okay, and this is where it's attributed to just about any disease or chronic illness. So it has a picture, it has a hand in everything. And what we've got to remember is we have enough iron in our bodies. We don't need to add supplementation to that picture. But when it measures low in your blood, It just means it's locked away in your tissue. Okay, it's there. So what do we really need? Do we really need more iron, or do we need copper so we can bring that iron out of the tissue and back into circulation where it's supposed to be? It makes so much sense.
Oh, it does. It makes so much sense to me. Like, and even just listening to you explain it all over again, I'm just like, oh, I love this. It makes me just like so excited and really lights me up. But I know other people, and it really comes down to beliefs and values, and I get all that, but a lot of people still don't really get it. And that's why I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today, because you're really breaking down the nuts and crannies, the nooks and crannies of like understanding it. The nuts and bolts. But anyways, I do have a question. You were speaking about like the active form of ceruloplasmin. Now, for ceruloplasmin to be in its active form, and obviously there's no way you can measure that or test for that, there would be specific nutrients or specific things in our life, in our diet, that would activate that. And I just, it really came to me when you were explaining it that I thought maybe one of our listeners might have that as a question. And is there a specific nutrient or something that you would ensure somebody's doing to ensure their ceruloplasmin is active?
Yeah, so I mean, there's several parts to that of having having your ceruloplasmin having that function where it's able to. And it's not going to be anything new. It is retinol, as we've spoken about before. It is magnesium, is really important, which I'll talk about in a minute, how we measure the magnesium. It is copper, getting enough bioavailable copper in your diet as well, which again, liver, grass-fed liver is just the most magnificent source of that.
I call it the duck's nuts.
It is the duck's nuts. I'm gonna put that in my notes.
It's not literally a duck's nuts, but I call it the duck's nuts.
And yeah, so I guess the other parts of that are looking at again, so it comes down to conversation with a specific client, but often we'll see high copper and low ceruloplasmin. And so we have to start asking questions of, why is that copper so high? Why is it not complexed in that ceruloplasmin or those proteins where it's really important to be, so it can be available for our bodies to use? What has liberated that copper from the ceruloplasmin, where it's no longer doing its job and it's actually being a bit of a nuisance in our body. And that's where a lot of people will go down that rabbit hole of copper toxicity, which, according to Morley, is inaccurate in terms of its order of magnitude. So, we have to start asking, why is that copper free? Well, it's never free, it's always attached to something, but why is it out there? And, that's where we start to ask questions about, antibiotic use and medications and different stresses in your life that may be contributing to you having that high copper that's not housed to have that function where it needs to be bioavailable.
That makes so much sense. Like when someone comes to me or we want to have the chat about copper toxicity, I honestly, like, because I'm such a bogan, I keep things so simple. For me, the way I look at copper and the way I look at iron are so similar. Like, I'll say there's really no such thing as iron deficiency, just like there's really no such thing as copper toxicity, although it's maybe possible, but in a general case, and they both require things to get them active or mobilized, or the metabolism to be working functionally. And I'm so glad you touched on copper toxicity, because it was in one of my notes to speak into, is that really it's just essential that you're lacking something to keep it, like the metabolism of it, functioning well. And is that like a good bogan way of explaining?
Yeah, in fact, I've just come up with my own analogy right now about copper. And I guess, when we're talking about iron toxicity and copper toxicity, which has probably got a lot more press than iron toxicity up until now, I'd like to think that's changing. But, copper that's not where it's supposed to be is a bit like a really sore arm iron where it's not supposed to be is like having your arm chopped off. So, you know, orders of magnitude about how they affect your body. One's a nuisance and annoying, and the other one's pretty life altering. And that for me is iron versus copper toxicity.
So true. So true.
So the other mineral that we measure, and the one that probably people are most familiar with, is magnesium. So we measure magnesium via the red blood cell. Now that's really a specific way of measuring it that you're probably not going to find through your GP. They generally won't order, they'll always do serum. So that's something that we can talk about, you know, getting you via another pathway. So, I mean, magnesium has a hand in it, you know, in our body's functioning. So to put it into perspective, that we have about, I don't know the exact figure, 9,000 and something enzyme functions in our body. Magnesium is connected to about 3,000. Actually, I can give you the exact figure, 3,751 of those. So, you know, it's pretty darn important. Most of us don't have enough. You know, our soils deplete, our foods are deplete. If we're eating a conventional standard type diet, it is something I believe that you are not necessarily going to get enough of unless you are supplementing it in some way. And it's our body's under stress. Hello, you know, we're most of us are in a chronic fight or flight state. So, you know, we're losing this magnesium, and it's sort of, you know, one of the catalysts for that, you know, the minerals getting deranged and causing all that amateur response. So we measure that.
I love magnesium.
Pardon?
Sorry, I wasn't too sure if I cut you up or not. But with magnesium, like I love it. And I never used to prioritize it so much until I really went down this path of understanding just how essential it is, but also how much most of us are probably lacking. And then, like you said, add in that stress. So like if I know I've had a day where I'm in front of the computer for a long period of time, or I'm training really hard, or I'm emotionally exhausted, I'll not only have an Epsom salt bath, but I'll make some mag bicarbonate water, or really just get extra in, and it makes a massive difference. Like in comparison to if I didn't do that, like it makes a really, really big difference.
Yeah, and I think in my experience so far, most people aren't taking enough. However, there's a caveat to that, and that is that it needs to be done in proper balance with your other electrolytes. You know, otherwise you can end up feeling even more rubbish in a way. And I do get clients from time to time who say, oh, you know, I can't take magnesium. It makes me feel really bad. And that's when we start asking questions. Okay, well, you know, are you balancing it with your other minerals? So everything works together. You know, they antagonize each other. They work with each other. And we have to be mindful of all those relationships. You know, ratios are really important as well. It's not just about this simplistic model of you're low in this, take this, you're high in that, don't take that. It's just your body doesn't work that way. And zinc is a really good example of that. We do measure zinc as part of this panel in your plasma or serum, but we don't recommend that you supplement zinc, even if your zinc's low. And in my experience so far, most clients have low zinc in their blood. So again, it just means the zinc is elsewhere. And it's just another indication. So zinc and iron share an absorption pathway. Okay, so low zinc, high iron. So we really start to kind of build a picture, you know, low zinc, low magnesium, your iron's getting in. You've got issues with your iron recycling, which is, you know, which is at the foundation of it. And then the question is why? Because you don't have enough bioavailable copper.
Yeah.
Okay, and then why don't you have enough bioavailable copper? You know, you've just got to keep asking deeper and deeper questions. And surprise, surprise, it all comes back to stress, really, the stress of your life. So, yeah, so they're markers that we use. I won't go into retinol and vitamin D today. I think vitamin D is a is a subject all of its own. And why we don't recommend that you use vitamin D in a synthetic way is another subject of its own. But needless to say, you can get your retinol and your storage D is a lot easier to get measured, a lot more accessible, and you're looking for a 3-to-1 ratio. So, in Mother Nature, these nutrients are found with more retinol than they are vitamin D. So I'll just this when it comes to vitamin D, I guess you could start to ask your question, what happens when we take bucket loads of vitamin D and we're not even thinking about our vitamin A, which in Mother Nature comes 3-to-1 or 10-to-1, actually, I think it is in Mother Nature. So you can ponder that at a later date.
So interesting. And I'm sure, like, if anyone really wants Amy and I to talk further into this topic, like, I'm more than happy to continue this series because it's such an incredible topic and that can continue on forever and ever. But we've really covered a lot today, and I'm so grateful for your time. I do have one question circling back to magnesium. I just really would love for you to touch on quickly in relation to iron and the burn rate of magnesium. So we're already looking at most people are deficient, most people are stressed, most people are iron dysregulated, and then add in that, and there is like a higher burn rate to the magnesium with this iron dysfunction. Am I correct in saying that?
Absolutely, yeah. So not directly. It's not as simplistic as iron causes magnesium depletion, but it does. Absolutely, it does. And Morley coined that phrase, the magnesium burn rate. So, for those of us who are familiar with that, we get around in our day thinking, oh, what's my magnesium burn rate on this? Okay, let's bring it down. Let's dial it back. But yes, the more unbound toxic iron that you have, the more issues you're going to have with maintaining your magnesium status as well. So, yeah, the more magnesium that you will need. Absolutely. And, and that's body, everything's systemic. And at the absolute base of this is iron, copper, and magnesium. And that sounds so simplistic, and people have a hard time with how simple it is. But we love to complicate things, and really at a simplistic level, if we can get some sort of balance with those 3 minerals and, pay a bit of attention to the other things we've talked about, then you're setting yourself up for health.
Yep, absolutely. And be devoted to understanding that you've got yourself to here over however many decades. Like for me, I was on iron supplements and the pill 1 decade, iron supplements 2 decades, a life full of stress and eating disorders and whatnot. So it's not going to happen overnight. And I'm like 3 years into my healing journey, and I'm only just getting started. So it's being devoted, to those daily rituals of, like, for me, it's like, have oysters once a week, get your liver in once a day, drink orange juice, get bee pollen in, like eat foods like animal based, like fat foods. And so, yeah, it's like being consistently devoted to that.
And you've got to be in it for the long game. Health isn't this end point that we reach. It's just what we want to maintain till the day we die. That's the ultimate goal. And I think when people ask, which they often do, how long will this take, or when will I start feeling better? I throw it back at them and say, well, how long did it take you to get the way that you are? And often, again, probably another conversation, but it can predate their existence, and you start to look at the generational effects of being depleted in different minerals. But that's another conversation.
A whole other, and something that I'm actually really, really passionate about. Like, I'm right into like generational trauma, DNA, like, and everything that gets passed down our lineage. I freaking love it. So maybe we could add that to our little list of things to chat about. But
yeah. Me as well, and it's something I'm only really just learning about. It's really new information that I'm delving into around the trauma and that the generational effects as well. Yep,
really powerful. Hey, well, that's a really broad chat about iron and blood panels. I guess, like I said before, I will pop a heap of information below here. So if you want to chat with Amy more about what we spoke about today, I know in her practice, she does do this with clients. But you did also mention before, Amy, that we'll put down some details on where they can go to the root cause protocol website.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, so I mean, you can pop that in the notes, but it's just rootcauseprotocol.com, and there you'll find, if you're really chasing the specific values, the ideal values, then you can actually find them written there for you. So it's, you know, Molly puts out this information in a way that is free and accessible to everybody. So head over there and start your education. It's a bit of a rabbit hole, and you know, there's a year's worth of reading over there, including the research as well. But yeah, I guess the primary, you know, goal of a coaching session with me is to, you know, discover when and why the stress of your life how it's affected your minerals, which has led you to your health struggles. That's what we're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I cannot wait to release this one. So thank you, Amy.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me again.
I love it.